A generation ago, manufacturing was still the powerhouse of the Scottish economy. One industry, shipbuilding, symbolised the country's industrial might.
It's important to reflect just what Scotland was like in the 1960s and 1970s. Absolutely impossible to envisage that now, but the Clyde was alive, producing shipping for the world.
And in those days, the battle lines in the class war were clearly defined.
There was this dreadful thing called the Tories and this wonderful thing called the Labour Party. And I think there was still a good bit of that fundamental belief in the Labour Party as the champion and the protector of working class people.
And in return, the party could rely on a guaranteed number of votes for their survival.
It was obvious that Scotland was essential to the possible formation of a Labour majority at Westminster. And that meant that Scotland got a lot of interest from the UK Labour Party because it was an area which could deliver the seats at Westminster.
The relationship between the Scottish Labour Party and the working class was one of mutually assured survival. If manufacturing jobs were threatened, the party was expected to defend them in Parliament. In the summer of 1971, Scottish shipbuilding faced just such a threat. The Conservatives stopped funding the firm Upper Clyde Shipbuilders, threatening the livelihood of thousands.
And the workers and their union representatives responded in a very unusual and then imaginative way. Instead of going on strike, they announced the establishment of a work-in to put pressure on the Conservative government to reverse the pulling of the plug on subsidies to the company.
Shop steward Jimmy Reid announced a new style of industrial action. The fight to keep UCS open was as much about Scottish national identity as working class solidarity.
The shop stewards representing the workers are in control of this yard, and there will be no hooliganism, there will be no vandalism, there will be no bevying, because the world is watching us, and it's our responsibility to conduct ourselves responsibly and with dignity and with maturity.
This is an extract from my published diaries for Wednesday the 18th of August 1971. And this is at the time of the Upper Clyde Shipbuilders. And in the morning at 8 I was at the yards at Clydebank and I had a talk with Jimmy Reid. And then afterwards, after lunch, I went out and joined an enormous demonstration. The numbers of people involved varied in estimate from 50,000 in The Guardian to over 70,000 in The Times. There were probably 70 to 75,000 people there. And we linked arms and marched right to Glasgow Green.
Support for the Scottish working class heroes flooded in from all over the world, with John and Yoko sending red roses and a cheque for £1,000. The work-in lasted for 9 months, with the men committed to meeting the order book. Eventually something had to give. Conservative Prime Minister Ted Heath acceded to the workers' demands. The UCS work-in was a milestone in the history of the Scottish Labour movement. The workers had triumphed over the bosses, but it had other far-reaching consequences for the cause of nationalism.
Well, I think a lot of people in Scotland felt that Scottish industry was just regarded as something could be disposed of. And a lot of the national feeling, which later came forward in the campaign for devolution, began at that time, because they felt that all decisions were taken in London. When anything went wrong, the only planning document there was a railway timetable to London to go and see a British minister.
The remoteness of London from the day-to-day running of the Scottish economy was to play a major part in the arguments about self-rule throughout the 1970s. It was an issue central to the growing support for the Scottish National Party. The popularity of their call for devolution, or even full independence, put the fear of God into large elements of the Labour Party.
Don't forget that many Labour governments were elected on the strength of Scottish Labour MPs. Take them away, then England's natural conservatism would effectively keep Labour out of power.
An earlier indication that Labour might have a fight on its hands occurred in 1967, with the arrival of a new and charismatic force in Scottish politics.
Winnie Ewing made the difference between night and day. She was ambitious for Scotland. She was quite exciting herself. You know, she drove a wee sports car and wore terrific clothes and so on. No, she was just right at the time.
Hamilton, the one result that's still to come, they've got this intriguing element of the Scottish nationalist candidate. Let's go and get a report from David Lomax.
Ewing, being a woman and an SNP candidate, was given very little chance of success in the Labour safe seat, although some were beginning to have doubts.
On polling day in Hamilton, I went into the council buildings and I met the election agent who was sitting there quite happy, like the king on a throne. And I had been knocking a few doors and I was getting worried, and I'd said to him, it's a bit worrying, we weigh the votes here.
All the candidates look very, very serious. Even the Labour candidate, who dismissed the Scottish nationalists not so long ago as a joke. We'll know the final result in a few minutes and we'll be bringing it to you as soon as we can.
Winifred Margaret Ewing,
Scottish nationalist.
18,397.
So the Scottish nationalists have taken Hamilton.
And I declare Winifred Margaret Ewing has been duly elected to serve in Parliament as the member for the Hamilton constituency.
With me in Hamilton I have the victorious candidate, the new MP, Mrs. Winifred Ewing. Congratulations, Mrs. Ewing. Why do you think you won?
I won because Scots people want to run their own affairs. They always have done. They wouldn't give the support to the Scottish National Party because they didn't think it had a chance of success.
At the time, it provided the SNP with only a single seat in Parliament, but it was of enormous symbolic value.